Well, good morning, my fellow planner geeks. I thought I would provide another little video to tell just a little bit more about how I use my Franklin planning system. But before I get there, I do have a couple of little stories to tell you. First off, I think it's really important. My one piece of advice, particularly to men, is that you marry someone who's smarter and better looking than you. It was really easy for me to do that. Carla and I have been married now for coming up on 31 years. So I think we're going to stick it out. She has a channel. It's called Stay Stitching, and I will try to link that in below so you can go find what she's doing. But after I filmed yesterday's video, I was thinking as I looked at it, I said, well, this is a nice overview, but it's not really getting into a lot of detail. So I thought, well, I'll go through it and I will film a series of shorter videos that have more detail on each section. And I sat there and was pondering that. Carla came in and watched my video, and the first thing she said was, well, that's a really nice overview, but you know, you ought to go back in and look at each section and give a little more detail. After 31 years, we really aren't separate people anymore. We don't even have separate brains. So anyway, I thought I would share with you one particular section, and we're going to look at how I plan out my to-do list and action items. But before we get there, I just have a couple things I want to share with you. I use this book, and I've used this book and this concept for probably, I guess, pushing 35 years now. Time Power used to be called Insight on Time Management, developed by Charles R. Hobbs in the 70s, and I first became aware of it in the early 80s. But it was really about using the day timer and to really plan out your day. So a lot of the concepts that I'm going to be sharing, I've stolen wholeheartedly from this book. Dr. Hobbs just passed away in April, and but I think he was a real treasure for those of us time geeks that like to work with stuff. And it's just a great book. You can still find it on Amazon for $2 or $3. There's a lot of copies of it out there. So anyway, I do want to share with you. Before I came back to the Franklin Planner or Day Timer, I was using a bullet journal, and I really liked the idea. And this is one of the books that I used, Claire Fontaine book. Worked really well with my fountain pens, and it worked pretty well for me as far as note taking. But when it came down to actually planning out what I needed to do in the future, it was a little bit tough. I just ended up not really enjoying the way I was able to plan out farther than just a week at a time. So prior to using that book, I had used a series of these field notebooks as small bullet journals, and they worked pretty well for me. This is not all of them that I filled up over the course of 4 or 5 years, but just kind of a sample. And I did have them all dated so that I could keep track of them. I know, yeah, that's a real nerd thing to do. But used quite a few of these books, and they work pretty well. As I was trying to develop a system that worked for me a little bit better, I pulled out this notebook cover that I've had, and I really like it, where I can keep the pocket notebooks in there. And I started developing an idea of coming up with a calendar and a monthly calendar, so it took me some time to write that down. And then I had all the other things that I see in my Franklin planner, but I was doing it by hand. You know, I had a future planners for months out ahead, some future planning ideas, my unifying principles in there, started working on goals there, working on an expenditure tracker. That didn't work that well. Started on my debt snowball tracker, trying to lay that out and see how that would work. Work on a monthly calendar with a master list, passwords, work on goals, and then the questions for prioritizing daily actions. We're going to talk about that quite a bit more. Again, another iteration of the debt snowball tracker. Long-range goals, which I think are really important. We'll talk about that probably more in a future video. Some intermediate life goals that I have. And then started working on a habit tracker, and I am going to talk quite a bit more about that. Came up with the grass catcher list, but didn't put anything in there because I decided at some point that this book was just, this format was too small for me. So this is now transformed just into a notebook, and I have a separate in there. I carry this with me either in my briefcase or in my pocket. If I'm not able to carry the large planner with me, I take this book, throw it in my pocket, can use that. So transforming, one of the things I did in one of the last field notes that I used as a planner is I pulled it out and started laying out my daily list. So this is kind of what it looked like. I did a 2-page per day setup. So on the one side I had the action list, and then I had a little place to track my expenses. You notice before I was talking about tracking expenses, what I bought. And then over here I did a diary record. And I did that every day, and I realized I was very productive. I thought I was. Just went through and did lots of things. Tracking expenses, tracking my daily action list, really got a lot done, was feeling very productive. Realized probably along about here that probably what I ought to do is just go back to a pre-printed planner so I didn't spend quite as much time having to lay out the pages. So I ordered a new planner that I previewed yesterday. So now we're going to take a look at that. And we're going to look specifically at how I use it to set up my daily actions. Hope I've got this close enough that we can kind of see. Okay, so one of the most important things for planning for me is to determine what I can do in the amount of time that I have available. And I always feel like I ought to be working on something that's a real high priority. So every morning I spend some time, 15 to 20 minutes, thinking about planning of what I'm going to do for the day. First question I would have to ask myself is, how much actual time do I have available? As a school teacher during the school year, I really don't have a lot of extra time available because, well, I'm doing my job, which is teaching. And I will be later on in the year showing how I'm going to use this notebook as a lesson planner. But for now, I just want to talk about those things that kind of fit outside of the normal teaching day. So I asked myself how much time I have available. Typically, on a normal school day, I will have half an hour to maybe an hour and a half of discretionary time, or time that I can work on stuff that I want to, which are high priorities. So adapting the questions that I received or learned from this book, The Time Power Method from Charles Hobbs, I wrote down the questions. And I think it's really important to help me really identify what I ought to be working on by asking these questions of myself every morning. So let's just take a look at it. First question that I ask myself is, of my long-range and intermediate high-priority goals, what should I work on today? So I have those goals written in this section, and so I'll go through and pick one or two maybe that I ought to work on. So I'm going to focus in on this one over here on professional right now, just to give a demonstration. I will participate fully in the development and growth of AMAC at PCHS. So in my early morning planning time, as I think of that, what I'm going to do is say, okay, so that's planning for working on AMAC, which is our academy. And one of the things that I know that I need to do is to work on our internship program, so we can place students in actual work experience rather than maybe sitting in academic classes when they'd be better served to be getting actual work-based experience. Now, I know the whole internship program as I develop might take 30 to 50 hours to complete. So rather than try to do all of that in today where I only think I have a half an hour to 45 minutes, I'm going to say internship brainstorm. Okay, that might be something that I could take on in 15 to 20 minutes and generate a pretty good list. So I have that identified there. Now I'm going to go back to my questions again. Okay, so the other question I ask, what projects, if left undone, represent the greatest threat to my survival? Okay, I still think that this internship program is probably the thing. Now, what projects does the boss consider most vital? So I think about that. That's going to be maybe a little bit different in the internship. They might not have quite the focus on that. But I know that my principal wants me to take a look at rehabbing the greenhouse. So I'll write that down. And I'm going to write plan because that's going to be a big job, and there's going to be multiple parts in that. So I'm going to take a look at that. Another question, what projects will give the highest return for the time invested? I'm going to go back and I'm going to think, okay, so I still have a little bit of time. Highest return for the time invested will probably be write 2 network letters. We're trying to find some sponsors to help us pay for some of our projects in the academy. So I'm going to write 2 network letters. And then which items on my previous daily action list and grass catcher list should I work on today? I've done a pretty good job this week, so I don't have a lot of things on my previous action list, but I'm going to take a look at a grass catcher list and see if there's something I ought to work on, if I can find that. I think I should probably work on my daily schedule layout. So I'm going to write daily schedule layout. All right. And then going back to my questions again. What do my unifying principles suggest? Is there something I ought to work on in my unifying principles? Okay, so the one that I'm focused on this week is being a man of integrity. So I need to search out and find some information about integrity. So I'm going to put research integrity. Okay, as I look at that, maybe I have a time for maybe about one more item. So that's my question. What has not been considered that will help yield long-term significant results? Well, I know we're getting ready to go on a trip, so I need to, I don't know, pack for trip. Now, I know there's a couple things I need to do on my personal list, so I'm going to come down here in personal list. I'm going to say rotate tires and oil change. I know there's some things that I need to get done. All right, now I'm going to go back. I've identified there's about 7 or 8 things there, so that's good. Now I want to go back to my questions. Now I have 5 more questions, prioritizing questions. So now I've got the items identified using this. I need to use these prioritizing questions to figure out what order and what relative importance they have to each other. And this is where I'm going to use my A, B, C, and D, and then urgent signifiers plus numbers. So which of the items I have listed will help me to achieve my long range and intermediate goals? So I go back and look at my list that I've built. Which one is going to help me meet those long-term goals? I think the first thing, the most important thing, is the internship brainstorm, the network letters, and then the packing for the trip. I go back in, what will yield the greatest long-term results? I think it's the internship brainstorm. So I think that's going to become my A1. And then the network letters will be A2. And then packing for the trip will be A3. The other things, what will give the highest payoff? Again, I think we're still up there. What will happen if I don't do each of these projects today? Who will affect? Will anyone suffer? Well, I think rotating the tires and getting the oil change are really important. So I'm going to put those A4 and A5. On a long-term basis, which items will make me feel best if I accomplish them? I think the daily schedule layout is something, but I've got 5 A's in there. So I'm going to take that to B. That's going to be B1. The greenhouse plan is going to become B2. Research integrity, while it's important, has some limited value. So I'm going to say it's B3. Okay, so there I've got my day laid out. Excuse me. A couple things that I forgot to tell you that I always put down every day for my planning is I always want to write down solitude. I want to make sure that I take some time for myself to work on myself, and then also time for planning. Now, these don't necessarily fit within the priorities. These are really time management goals. So I'm going to mark those as a time management TM goals. Now, thinking about what we do on a daily basis, there are a lot of things that we do that just become habits. And what's become really apparent to me is I don't need to always write all of those things down. So I have this habit tracker that I stole or borrowed from someone. And those are those things that I want to make sure I do every day, each day, because they have a high payoff for me. Now, your list might be different than mine. Mine has solitude and planning. I always need to make sure and take my allergy pills. I need to take my multivitamin. I always want to spend time in prayer and Bible study. One of my goals is to make sure I drink enough water. I want to spend some time working on my unifying principle focus for the week. I also want to spend some time journal writing and reflective writing. I keep track of the number of steps that I take and then the miles that I walked to see if I can start seeing some patterns. And then something that I've just added in the last week or so is an idea called morning pages, where it's just first thing in the morning, get up and spend some time just writing in a journal just to kind of clear the brain out, get all the thoughts down on paper, and that way they're kind of out of the way. And then it kind of opens my brain up. I learned that from some creative blog. Not that I'm a creative person, but artists and musicians do stuff like that just to get their brain cleared so that they have some space. So we'll see what kind of payoff we end up with that. You could end up with some other things on your list, maybe different types of responsibilities that are those kind of automated tasks you have to do every day, but you just want to make sure that you get them done. You would write those down and be able to check them off. So this is just one idea, the way I do that. Anyway, back to our daily planning. So I've got my list planned out here. And so the first thing I can do is the intern brainstorm. I'll spend 15 minutes. And where I might put that is on a sheet in the project section. Just put a sheet in here and then just some ideas. Brainstorm that out, or I might go to the computer and work on that as well. Okay, so if we got that done, we accomplished that, we're going to give it a nice check mark. Okay, writing the network letters, we go right to the computer, we can get that. We can do that done. Now let's say at some point in here, well, the greenhouse plan is a B priority for me. I get a call from my boss. So while I'm on the phone, I'm just going to go ahead and write his name down. I underline it. It used to be a long time ago, we always wrote the phone number down because we didn't have the smartphones that just remembered everything. I've kind of gotten away from always writing the number down, but if you're a person who likes that type of order, go ahead and write the phone number down. So you write the phone number by there. And then I'm just going to selectively write down the things that we talk about. So we've talked about the greenhouse, and he wants to have a meeting. So he gives me a suggestion of a day for meetings. The first place I go to look for the meetings, I look at my monthly calendar. And he wants to meet, here we're going on Tuesday, June 4th. He'd like to meet on June 7th. So I look and say, well, I can be there at 3 o'clock, so we negotiate that. So we're going to say, meet at his office, 3 p.m. Okay. I want to make sure and take my pencil, and I always write in the calendar in pencil. Go over there, and I'm going to put 3 p.m., Brian. And then to remember where I got the notes from, I'm going to go in parentheses. I'm writing that on the 4th, so I'm just going to put a 4 in parentheses. That's going to take me back when I go to get ready for that meeting. I just have to go to the 4th, and that will tell me what to look at. Now, let's say that we've talked about who we need to bring. So I need to bring, he asked me to bring several people, so I need to bring John to meeting. And I need to bring Kelly to meeting. Okay, I write these down in separate spots because while we're going to the same meeting, I won't see both of them at the same time. So we finished the call, and if I didn't know where his office was, I would put down directions or the address for his office, get there. And then I look here, and as a result of this discussion, I have 2 things that I need to do. So I'm going to go ahead and mark that with an asterisk and put a little line beside it because I want to do it. Okay. Now I know I can get on the phone to John real quick, so I'm going to write John and invite him to the meeting. And then so he called, will come to a meeting. Give myself a check mark. I've accomplished that. I didn't transfer that over onto my prioritized daily task list. This is something that I could do. Now I call Kelly, and she's not going to be in her office until till Wednesday. Or yeah, Wednesday. We're talking about Tuesday. So I'm gonna say I left a message with their secretary. And I know that she'll be back in office on Wednesday. So now I can't get a check mark there, but what I can do is go over here to the next day, which is Wednesday. And on my list, I'm going to write, call Kelly, re-meeting. And I'm going to put in parentheses a 4. So that's going to show up now when I review my list for tomorrow. When I get ready to do that list for tomorrow, there it is. It's going to show up. And I'm going to, rather than put a priority, I'm just going to put an asterisk, tell me that's calling for action, so I need to do it. All right? So you carry on through the day like that and get all these things. If I don't get some of this stuff done, even if it's my B's, but maybe I didn't get my packing for the trip done, I'm going to plan that forward. Put an arrow by it and then go to the next day when I'm going to do it. So this now has become an A, pack for a trip, because I'm leaving after that. Okay, go back and look at my list again. Is there anything? The greenhouse plan, we've already talked about that. That's in process. It's going to take a bit. So I'm going to put that there. I'm going to put a dot to say it's in progress. All right. The daily schedule layout, I can't really work on that. I'm not going to be able to actually work on that for a couple of weeks. So I'm going to plan it forward, and then I'm going to go find the appropriate day when I'm going to do that. That might be all the way here until the 20th. Then I would write that down in there. Then I at least have it checked off of this list. Research integrity, I'll get to that at some point. I've got my planning and solitude. So all of a sudden I've got things checked off, and then I can go to my list here. Oil change and rotate tires. If I need to make an appointment to do the rotate tires, that's how I get... take that from just a general thing like rotate tires to something more specific. So write an appointment. If I got the appointment, called them, rotate tires, I will call Discount Tire and get that appointment at 3 p.m. Then I go right here in my scheduled events, and I will write on the appointments, Discount Tire. Okay, so it might be, it's not often that you go from this list to an appointment on the same day. It might be in a future day that you would do that. So anyway, that's how I work that. As long as I do this, what that does is it gives me continuity from my long-range goals to my intermediate goals to immediate actions that are going to help me get to a point where I'm meeting those goals in small parts. Also on my notes, I always want to just pretty much discreetly or selectively write down the information. I don't need to write everything down. The things that are important. All right? So that's kind of the system in a nutshell as far as daily planning. I'd love to hear some of your insights and your thoughts about how you might do daily planning and the systems that you use. So make sure to check out my blog at paperinkplan.wordpress.com. Make sure and check out my wife's blog, Stay Stitching, or I guess it's her YouTube channel. Just look her up, Stay Stitching. I do appear on that occasionally, but she doesn't let me do that very often. And I hope you've had a good time watching this, and now go out and have a productive day. Bye.